Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Monday. It's May 26th, 2025. Today is day 598 since October 7th of 2023. We're approaching 600 days of war and catastrophe and the siege on Gaza and almost daily bombing and children being out of school and hostages being held. Catastrophe after catastrophe. I'm feeling quite tired. I flew and I'm actually at a conference related to Armenia and the Nagorno-Karabakh crisis related to the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So I'll be here in Switzerland for a few days as a part of those conversations about what makes for peace in other parts of the world. And of course, Armenia is a community that is quite central to the Middle East, with one of the four quarters of the old city of Jerusalem also being under threat. I wanted to give a few broad updates today. The Gaza death toll has risen to 54,000 is the official count, with another 122,966 being wounded. Just since the last ceasefire agreement, an additional 3,822 Palestinians have been killed and nearly 11,000 wounded. That's just since March 18th in the last several weeks. The Ministry of Health said that 38 bodies and 169 injured arrived at hospitals in the last 24 hours. Israeli forces have bombed. This is the most significant incident in the last 24 hours. There was a school that was turned as shelter in Gaza City that was bombed, and it caused a fire, and it killed at least 36 Palestinians, including several children. More than 50 have been killed in attacks since dawn on Monday. The UK-based Medical Aid for Palestinians says that Israel systematically dismantling Gaza's healthcare system is a part of the strategy that's being employed. Israel has, in effect, dismantled Gaza's healthcare system, according to the Deputy Director of Advocacy and Campaigns at the UK-based Medical Aid for Palestinians. 91% of 531 healthcare service points across Gaza have been completely non-functional, and more than 1,400 health workers have been killed. This means that not only are bombs being dropped that are disproportionately affecting the civilian population, but then when people go to have those injuries and those wounds treated, there's no treatment available. UK Medical Aid for Palestinians said, when I get in touch with doctors inside Gaza, they have no energy because they are starving and overwhelmed. Every hospital in Gaza has been targeted. Israel made sure that healthcare workers are detained or killed. This article and this UK-based Medical Aid for Palestinians cites the Friday bombing of the home of the two doctors that we talked about previously that killed 9 of their 10 children. These are not isolated incidents. They violate international humanitarian law, and they are a part of the systematic dismantling of Gaza's healthcare system. Just a few other facts. These are from Al Jazeera about the hospitals and medical facilities in Gaza in the north. The Indonesian Kamal Adwan, Al Shifa, Al Ali, and Al Awad hospitals have been repeatedly targeted. In central Gaza, Al Aqsa Hospital and Deir al-Balah has also been hit. In South Gaza, the Nasser Medical Complex and European Gaza Hospital in Khan Yunis have come under attack. The World Health Organization says there have been 700 attacks carried out on healthcare facilities since the war started, and more than 90% of Gaza's hospitals have been damaged or destroyed. This just adds to the further atrocities and the devastation on the civilian population of Gaza. In addition, only 4.6% of the cropland that is in Gaza is usable, according to the United Nations Satellite Center. They found that less than 5%, Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN, less than 5% of Gaza's cropland is able to be cultivated because of damage and lack of access. And a few days ago, the New York Times published an article about the new Gaza aid plan and how it's bypassing the UN and how it's billed as neutral. foreign contractors have set out to carry out this contentious new food aid system, displacing experienced aid agencies like the United Nations. This is seeking to answer the question of how is food going to be distributed? Now there's little bits of food going into Gaza. How's it going to be distributed? Throughout the war, the UN agencies and experienced aid groups have been the primary distributors. But now Israel is transferring that responsibility to a handful of privately formed organizations with obscure histories and unknown financial backers. Supporters of the project describe it as an independent and neutral initiative run mainly by American contractors. The main group that's providing security is run by Philip Riley, a former CIA officer. And then the fundraising group was headed by Jake Wood, a former U.S. Marine. We'll talk about Jake Wood in a minute. But announcing this arrangement in May, the ambassador for the U.S. to Israel, Mike Huckabee, said that it was wholly inaccurate to say that it was an Israeli plan. In other words, he was saying it's a U.S. plan. Meanwhile, breaking news today, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation director, maybe this was yesterday, but the last 48 hours, Jake Wood, who I just mentioned, resigned. He resigned as the executive director of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the Israeli which is this plan that the U.S. and Israel has for the distributing of aid through, these private agencies. Wood cites his inability to implement an independent aid delivery plan without violating core humanitarian principles as his primary reason for departure. He said, I urge Israel to significantly expand the provision of aid in Gaza through all mechanisms, and I urge all stakeholders to continue to explore innovative new methods for the delivery of aid without delay, diversion, or discrimination. I continue to believe the only sustainable path for long term is for Hamas to release all hostages, for there to be a cessation of hostilities, and a pathway towards peace, security, and dignity for all people in the region. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation also had another attempt to use food as a weapon during war. The Gaza Health Ministry said, because it's being propped up by the U.S. and Israel, and because there's already these aid distribution systems that are not being used. So whole new created ones, that are not actually allowing the aid to get in, are being established. By controlling aid through GHF, which its director resigned today due to a lack of independence. This is according to the Gaza Interior Ministry. Israel is seeking to achieve its malicious goals of implementing displacement plans, in addition to ensnaring and blackmailing citizens for security purposes. So in other words, the health ministry in Gaza strongly opposes this plan and thinks that it's just another mechanism of exhibiting occupation and control, or exerting it on Palestinians in Gaza. And then international responses. I wanted you to hear Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz said that Israel's recent attacks on the Gaza Strip are taking a humanitarian toll on civilians that can no longer be justified as a military campaign against terrorism. And I read this and I just got so angry, as if it was ever justified. As if it was ever justified to kill children and to bomb an entire population group and to cut off food. I just thought that these comments were so woefully inadequate. But Merz did say what the Israeli army is doing in Gaza now is doing, I don't understand, he said, to say it openly. He added in a planned call with Netanyahu this week, he told him not to overdo it. And it's hard for me to hear that and not scoff. Don't overdo it when you're killing children. Just kill some. Don't overdo it. It's just so absurd. I'm sorry. But a reminder that Merz in February said he would make sure the Israeli prime minister could visit Germany despite an arrest warrant issued against him by the ICC. As a member state of the court, Germany is required to detain suspects. So that's showing a little bit of a shift in Germany. There was a very important meeting in Madrid yesterday where Madrid hosted 20 countries as well as international organizations yesterday, with the purpose of stopping the war, which no longer has any goal. That's the Spanish Foreign Minister, Jose Manuel Albaraz. He said that in this terrible moment, this humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, we need to stop this war, break the blockade of humanitarian assistance, which must go unimpeded. This meeting in Madrid is a preparation meeting for the meetings at the United Nations in New York City in June. That's called the Peace Summit, that's being hosted by France and Saudi Arabia, June 17th to 19th. There was a previous meeting in Madrid last year that brought together countries like Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. as well as European nations like Norway and the Republic of Ireland that have recognized a Palestinian state. Yesterday's meeting on Sunday included representatives of the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. After the EU did decide this week to review its cooperation deal, Alvarez, the foreign minister of Spain, said we must consider sanctions. We must do everything to consider stopping this war. There was tumult in Jerusalem today, in Israel and the occupied East Jerusalem, because today was Jerusalem Day, and there was a march that aimed, this is normally a day where there has been quite a bit of Jewish nationalism expressed, but reports indicated that Palestinian shops in the Old City of Jerusalem were attacked, and the far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and others stormed the Al-Aqsa compound today. There were protests in Sheikh Jarrah and occupied East Jerusalem. And, Jerusalem Day is a day when Israelis, often in the tens of thousands, carry out a march. They go from the western side of the city through the Damascus gate leading into the Old City into East Jerusalem. They carry flags. They chant anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian slogans. And then the march ends at the Western Wall, which, of course, is the holiest site in Judaism, which is also in East Jerusalem. These particular Israelis say that Jerusalem is their undivided capital. They don't differentiate between East and West Jerusalem. And they also say that the international community has not, even though most of the international community, the U.S. under Trump recognized East Jerusalem as a part of the state of Israel. But Palestinians say there's no future for a Palestinian state without East Jerusalem as its capital. Today, on Jerusalem Day, Ben-Gvir said Gaza is ours, and he called against giving humanitarian aid. We mustn't give humanitarian aid to terrorists, not fuel, not food. Hamas needs to receive a bullet to the head, he said. Ben-Gvir added that while total victory is near, Netanyahu must allow for the Israeli Defense Forces to finish the job. Jerusalem is ours, Israel is ours, Gaza is ours, and we must continue demanding without compromise. Ben-Gvir said this in a speech today at the Western Wall. And finally, I wanted to close referring to the United States. The Institute of Peace, the U.S. Institute of Peace, has reclaimed its headquarters. This was after winning a court case over Elon Musk's cost-cutting team. So USIP retook control of their headquarters this past week. 2 days after the federal judge sided in their favor, the Institute's acting president, George Moose, entered the organization's headquarters with private security at the Institute's outside attorney for the first time since being escorted off the premises during the Doge takeover. Moose and most of the Institute's board were fired in March, part of this mass slashing of the federal workforce. And I also missed last week that there was a reorganization in the White House where several members of the administration were cut or put on leave, including members of the national security staff. One of those who's reported to have been put on administrative leave was Eric Traeger, who serves on the National Security Council for the Middle East. And a former member of the National Security Council said it's terrible. Less people means less control of bureaucracy, and the key is getting people who are loyal, not getting less people. I wanted to close with a quote by Reverend Susie Hayward, who's on our Leadership Council at Churches for Middle East Peace. She's a pastor of Minister and Justice and Formation at Creekside, UCC in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She's a former staff member at USIP. She said, I'm so grateful that the week brought the return of the U.S. Institute of Peace, as 2 young Israeli officials were murdered in D.C. by a vigilante assassin, claiming his action justified in defense of freeing Palestine from its occupation. It's not. The U.S.-funded starvation and forced displacement of civilians in Gaza continues and escalates, claimed justified by the existence of Hamas. It is not. And as we approach the 5-year anniversary of George Floyd's state murder, claimed justified because he was Black and used drugs, he was not. As used drugs, it was not. As Congress passes a big, beautiful bill that will steal from the poor to give to the rich, claimed justified because the poor are lazy and the rich are more deserving, they are not. On Memorial Day weekend, when we remember all who are lost in wars, we need the U.S. Institute of Peace. We need to stop believing that violence is a legitimate, effective, moral way to solve our problems. May God be with all the mourners, the peace builders, and nonviolent resistors. regardless of if you're Republican or Democrat, may we come together to practice just that. May God be with all the mourners, the peace builders, and the nonviolent resistors, knowing that violence is not the way towards peace. Only nonviolent means can make peace possible. May we continue in those efforts in the name of Christ. Amen.